All right, today we're going to tackle a really weird, fascinating paradox happening in AI right now. How in the world is a model that was built for text, the transformer, now beating the pants off models that were specifically designed for decades to understand images? It's kind of a classic underdog story, and trust me, the answer is way more surprising than you think. Okay, let's just jump right in with a perfect example. So I had an AI whip up this image of a cat, but with colorful parakeet feathers. Now, when we show this exact same picture to two top-tier AI models, we get two totally different answers. On one hand, you've got Microsoft's ResNet, a classic, an old-school image model, and it says macaw. But then you show it to Google's Vision Transformer, which is based on a text model, and it gets it right. It says Egyptian cat. So how is that even possible? This really gets to the core question we're asking today. Why does the model built for language see the cat, while the one built for images gets totally thrown off by the feathers? To figure this out, we've got to look at how each of these models fundamentally sees the world. So, first up, let's talk about the long-reigning champion of computer vision, the convolutional neural network, or CNN for short. For like over 25 years, this was the blueprint for teaching a machine how to see. I mean, everything from recognizing handwritten zip codes way back when to identifying all the objects in your photos. Now, the secret sauce for CNN is this operation called convolution. And the main idea is actually pretty simple. Just picture a tiny little magnifying glass, we call it a kernel, that slides across the entire image. And at every single spot, it just looks at a small patch of pixels and combines them to create one new pixel in a new transformed image. Okay, so here's how that works, step by step. This kernel, which is really just a small grid of numbers, is placed over a part of the image. Then it multiplies its own numbers with the pixel values it's sitting on top of. And finally, it just adds all those results up to produce a single new pixel. And it just repeats that. It slides over and does it again and again across the whole image. And by doing this over and over, the CNN starts to recognize really basic patterns, things like edges and texture. So this whole process makes CNNs really powerful, for sure. But it also makes them very opinionated. In the machine learning world, we have a term for this, a strong inductive bias. What that really means is that the model comes preloaded with a set of built-in assumptions about how images are supposed to work. And that's a classic double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps the model learn way faster, but on the other, it really limits what it's even capable of seeing. So what are these big assumptions? Well, a CNN basically believes three things about the world. First is locality. It assumes the most important stuff is right next to a pixel, in its immediate neighborhood. This is what makes it so good at picking out textures. The second is translation invariance. Basically, an eye is an eye. It doesn't matter if it's in the top left or the bottom right of the picture. And the third is hierarchy. The idea that you build up complex objects, like a face, by first finding simple edges, then combining those into shapes, and so on. And that first assumption, locality, that is the key to our whole puzzle. The CNN prioritized the local texture of the macaw feathers over the global shape of the cat. Okay, so now let's bring in our challenger, the transformer. This model has a much weaker inductive bias. In plain English, that means it makes way fewer assumptions about the data it's looking at. And all of its power comes from a totally different mechanism called self-attention. And self-attention is, honestly, a revolutionary idea. Just forget that tiny little sliding window from the CNN. With self-attention, every single pixel in the image gets to look at and communicate with every other pixel, all at the same time. It gets a complete global view of the entire image right from the get-go. The original paper that introduced the transformer came from Google, a search company, right? So it's no surprise that the best analogy here is a database query. Think of it this way. One pixel, let's call it the query pixel, basically asks every other pixel in the image, hey, how relevant are you to me? And then it creates a new version of itself based on a weighted average of all the answers, giving more importance or more weight to the pixels that are the most relevant. And this right here just brilliantly highlights the fundamental difference between these two. A CNN is stuck in its little neighborhood. It's all about locality. For it to understand the relationship between, say, the cat's ear and its tail, it takes many, many layers of processing. But a transformer? It gets that global context from the very beginning. That cat's ear and its tail can talk to each other directly in a single step. It's a huge difference. So there you have it, two totally different philosophies, local versus global. But the story of why the transformer completely took over the world of computer vision, well, it goes a little deeper than just that. And that brings us to a really crucial question. Is self-attention just, a different way to do the same thing as convolution? Is it just a different tool for the same job? And the answer is a big, fat no. What researchers have discovered is actually pretty profound. Self-attention isn't just different from convolution, it's a superset of it. And what that means is that it's just a more general and fundamentally more powerful operation. So what does being a superset actually mean in practice? Well, it means a transformer can, if the data tells it to, learn to act exactly like a CNN. It can teach itself to focus only on nearby pixels, basically mimicking a convolution. And this is the absolute key, it can also do what a CNN simply can't. It can learn those complex, long-range, global patterns across the whole image. So it's not a side grade, it's a strict upgrade in its expressive power. But look, this smarter architecture is really only one piece of the puzzle. The Transformers takeover was also about just perfect timing. It showed up right as the hardware got good enough. We're talking about GPUs and TPUs, which are absolute beasts at the kind of massive parallel math that attention needs. And on top of that, the goalposts for AI started to shift. The ambition grew to creating single, multimodal models that could understand text, images, and audio all at once. And for that job, the flexible, less opinionated transformer is perfect in a way the super specialized CNN never could. So, the Transformer won. It's a more powerful architecture that just happened to show up at the exact right moment. But all that power comes at a pretty steep cost, which brings us to one last really important question. See, the very thing that makes self-attention so powerful, letting every pixel talk to every other pixel, is also its biggest Achilles heel. I mean, think about it. For every single pixel, you have to calculate its relationship with every other pixel. For a tiny little image, that's no big deal. But for a modern high-res photo with millions of pixels, the amount of math you have to do just explodes. It becomes astronomically expensive. It's just not practical. And that leaves us with the billion-dollar question that researchers are still wrestling with. If doing this pure pixel-by-pixel global attention is just way too slow and expensive, then how do modern systems like vision transformers actually make it work on the high-resolution images we use every day? Solving that problem, that trade-off, is really the key that unlocked this whole AI revolution we're living through. It turned a cool theoretical idea into something that actually works in the real world. But the clever tricks they used to pull that off, well, that's a story for another time.